The King of Justice, a historical and emotional story. Chapter 1, The King's Oath. The morning sun rose softly over the golden domes of Baghdad. As the first light touched the tall minarets of the royal palace, the call to prayer echoed across the city. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. This was the golden age of Baghdad, a city of knowledge, power, and prosperity. And ruling this empire was Sultan Nasiruddin bin Fahd, a king whose fame spread not because of his wealth or conquests, but because of his justice. People used to say, "Greater than when Sultan Nasiruddin gives a judgment, even the angels nod in agreement." In his court, every person, rich or poor, stood equal before the law. His ministers often whispered, "Our king's throne rests not on gold, but on fairness." Yet, inside his heart, Nasiruddin always feared one thing. What if one day I fail to remain just? Every night, he prayed alone under the stars. "Greater than O Lord of the worlds, if my heart ever inclines toward injustice, then take this crown away from me, for a throne without justice is a burden, not an honor." Chapter 2, The Name of Justice. One morning, the royal court was in full session. Ministers, scholars, guards, and citizens stood in silence, waiting for the Sultan's decree. Suddenly, the gates opened, and an old woman, her clothes torn and face pale, entered the court crying. She said, "Greater than O King of Time, my son was murdered by the nephew of your minister. Because he is rich and powerful, no one dares to speak the truth." The entire court froze. The minister's face turned pale. All eyes turned toward the Sultan. After a brief silence, Nasiruddin stood and said firmly, "Greater than in this court, we do not see ranks or titles. We only see truth. Justice will be done, even if the heavens tremble." An investigation began. Witnesses were brought. The royal judge examined every piece of evidence carefully. And soon, it was proven, the murderer was indeed the minister's nephew. The court waited for the king's reaction. He could have easily spared him. But Sultan Nasiruddin's voice thundered across the hall. "Greater than if I spare a murderer today because of his rank, then tomorrow, my justice will become a joke. The law must prevail." He ordered the punishment as per the law of qisas, a life for a life. The entire court trembled. But the people of Baghdad rejoiced, chanting, "Greater than long live Nasiruddin, the King of Justice." Chapter 3, The Trial of the Heart. Years passed. The empire flourished. Sultan Nasiruddin grew older, and his son, Prince Hamza, grew into a handsome, brave young man, intelligent but arrogant. One evening, Hamza went out hunting with his companions. On their way, they stopped near a small village where a farmer's daughter was drawing water from a well. The prince mocked her, and the girl, fearless and pure, responded boldly. Angered by her defiance, the prince drew his sword in rage. A flash of steel, a cry, and silence. The girl fell lifeless to the ground. By morning, the news had reached the palace. The king's hands trembled as he heard it. For the first time in his reign, justice stood face to face with blood, his own blood. Chapter 4, The Battle Within. The royal court assembled again. The judge presented all the evidence. Witnesses confirmed that the prince had indeed taken an innocent life. The room was silent. The ministers looked at one another, afraid to breathe. Finally, the Grand Vizier spoke softly. "Greater than your majesty, if you punish the prince, the people may revolt. The stability of the kingdom depends on him. Perhaps we can find another way." The king did not reply. He rose slowly, left the court, and went to his private chamber. There, under the dim light of a lantern, he opened the Holy Quran. His eyes fell upon the verse. "Greater than indeed, Allah commands justice and excellence." Surah An-Nahl, 90. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "Greater than O my Lord, you know this judgment will break me." But how can I face you if I choose blood over truth? Chapter 5, The Judgment. The next morning, the court was filled with citizens. Whispers filled the hall, would the Sultan save his son or the law? Sultan Nasiruddin entered, his face pale but his eyes steady. He said loudly, "Greater than today's verdict will not decide my son's fate, it will decide my soul's fate." The judge pronounced the ruling according to divine law. Qisas, death for death. A gasp ran through the court. The prince, standing in chains, looked at his father with tears. "Greater than father. You can forgive me. You are the king. Please, save me." Nasiruddin's voice shook but did not falter. "Greater than I can save you, my son. But then who will save me from the wrath of God on the day of judgment?" He stepped down from his throne and embraced his son tightly. For a moment, both wept silently. Then the king said, "Greater than today, I lose my child, but I save the honor of justice." When the sentence was carried out, the city fell into silence. The people wept, not just for the prince, but for the king whose heart was shattered by righteousness. Chapter 6, The People's Voice. From that day, the name Nasiruddin became a legend. He was no longer called sultan or ruler. He was called Al-Adil, the just. The people said, "Greater than he is the king who sacrificed his son for justice. Such a man rules not a land, but hearts." But for Nasiruddin, praise meant nothing. His nights were sleepless, his prayers endless. He would often whisper in solitude, "Greater than O Lord, I have obeyed your command, but my heart feels empty. Take this pain as my offering." Chapter 7, Peace for the Soul. Months passed. One evening, as the king sat alone in the mosque, a poor dervish entered, his clothes torn, but his eyes full of divine light. He said, "Greater than O Sultan, I bring you news from the unseen. The Almighty is pleased with you. You did not lose a son, you gained eternal honor. A king who judges against his own blood stands closest to God." Hearing this, the king's tears flowed freely. For the first time since his son's death, he felt peace. A peace deeper than sleep, warmer than life. Chapter 8, The Legacy of Justice. Years later, Sultan Nasiruddin passed away. The day of his death, the entire city mourned. On his tomb, they carved these words: "Greater than here lies a king who sacrificed his heart for justice." Generations passed, dynasties fell, cities changed. But the people of Baghdad still say, "Greater than when you walk past the grave of Nasiruddin." The wind itself whispers, justice never dies. Moral of the story. This story teaches us a timeless truth. Greater than justice is not bound by blood. A true ruler is not one who rules over lands, but one who rules over his conscience. Sultan Nasiruddin's name faded from history books, but his spirit lives in every act of fairness and every honest heart. Because as long as justice survives, the kingdom never falls.